But really, the thought for this, when Mushtaq asked me if I could present at the Value Voices, is my immediate thought was about balance, because it's something I haven't heard a lot of people talk about. And yet I hear a lot of people talk about reasons why they can't do something, or why something's not going to work for them in their career, or why they can't follow the value methodology in their career. And a lot of it has to do with balance and choices. And that's what I want to talk to about tonight, is about my experience with balance and how, I managed to sort of balance my career aspirations and professional aspirations and certifications all at the same time and let them coexist. So just looking at a bit of an overview of what I want to talk about today, as I want to talk first about what balance means to me. It may mean different things to different people, but I'm going to talk about what it means to me. I want to talk about my early career aspirations, and that's important because things change and your balance changes over time. I want to, of course, talk about the moment that my life changed, and that's really how I got into value analysis, and that really was a changing point in my life. Then I want to talk a little bit more about work balance, family balance. I want to put this all in the value analysis context. I want to talk about building a value analysis program at the same time as your career. And once again, I want to then get back to choices, talk a lot about choices and what these choices mean. And I want to talk about the results. So this is going to be a lot about how to incorporate value analysis, the value methodology in your life and your career, and say that, yes, you can do it all. It can coexist. And that's what I'm here to talk about. So what does balance mean to me? Balance is something that a lot of us learn early in our lives. You think about even when you're a toddler and you're playing with building blocks. And one of the first things you see young people do, at least I did myself, I know for sure my boys all did this, is you get them a toy like some building blocks and they start trying to build towers and balance them on top of each other. And that's an important life lesson because not everything balances well. And you have to think about how to balance that. What shapes go together? How do you put the shapes together? How do you balance that? And then, of course, you get out on the playground. And maybe it's a little different for kids these days, but at least when I was a child, one of the popular things you'd run into on the playground was a teeter-totter. And somebody get on one end of the board and somebody get on the other end of the board. And you try to play with this and find a balance point, or at least you didn't want, one really large child on one side and a really small child on the other side, because a small child would just get launched in space or just sit up there forever and not move much. And it wasn't a very fun ride. So this is where we learn about balances early in our life. But it's not just two things. When you think about work, life, career balance, it's multifaceted. There are many different things that we talk about. And you have to balance all those very aspects to have a life that's rewarding. And really, in the end, to me, what it meant was really a way to pay the bills, yet also do what I love. And that's what I think about a lot. A lot of times my career came down to choice, okay, what can pay the bills and what do I really want to do? And that has continued to this very day. And I'll talk about that as we get into a few of the later slides. So one of the examples I want to talk about, just to give you a quick example of how balance works, is what I'll call the hobby balance. So anybody who knows me knows that one of my hobbies, besides work and all the other great things that Steve talked about, is I have a hobby that I like to restore old antique cars. Picture right here of cars that I'm working on in the shop. This picture is a few years old, but it gives you an idea that there's stuff going on at all times that are outside of work. We just have this relief. I love to work on antique cars. I love to restore cars. However, I learned very early in that hobby, and this applies to absolutely any hobby you have, because I've tried all kinds of other hobbies as well. I've tried collecting things. I've tried, doing crafts. And it's what I call the space, time, and money equilibrium. Because you have to have space to work on your hobby. You have to have time to work on your hobby, and you have to have money to fund your hobby. And often those things don't all align at the same time. I think about just the antique car hobby. When I was really, when I was a teenager, I had lots of time to work on my hobby, but I had no space and no money. And then I started working and I got a little bit older and I had still had great amount of time to work on my hobby, and I had some disposable income, so I had money to put in my hobby, but I didn't own a garage, so I had no space to put into my hobby. And I was kind of using other people's facilities, and it didn't really work because I didn't have space. And then I got enough money to the point where I bought my first house, and I was really happy because finally I had space and I had time. But I had no money whatsoever to put into my hobby, so I couldn't work on my hobby. And as you go through stages in life, there's different stages. Eventually I got married, and I had space and I had money, but I didn't have time. And this is what goes on with any hobby. You have to always find that equilibrium to find the space, time, and money to do that hobby. And that's just three things that I was balancing at that point in time for this hobby. But it came down to two very important things. The first one is, what do you value? What do you value? So when it comes to space, time, and money, looking at my first couple of houses, I valued having a garage. I could have had a nicer house without a garage, or I could have taken a smaller property or an older property with a garage. And I valued having a garage for my hobby. Same can go with time. I would rather spend time in the garage working on my hobby on a Friday night than going out to a bar. That might not always work for everybody, but that's what I valued. And this applied throughout life. You have to, in any hobby. So if you're really passionate about horses and that's your hobby, you're going to value taking time to go out to the horse barn over spending time in front of the TV. What do you value? And it applies to things. And why I wanted this very important about is think about when we're as value practitioners and we're sitting in front of a room of people, we're always asking them what they value. We're asking them what their values are. We're asking them to make choices based on their values. The next thing is, what is the function? And this can apply to many aspects. What is the function of your hobby? Is the function of your hobby, in this case, to have a completed car that I can drive? Or is the function of my hobby that I wanted something that would give me a stress relief? That it didn't really matter how long it took to complete a car because I enjoyed the process of doing the restoration because that took stress out of my life and gave me something away from work. What do you value? Do you have a hobby like or working on small projects where you sit by yourself and you look at something really intimately? Or do you have a hobby that involves being in a very gregarious setting and you get energized? Because they help me with that hobby balance, what I value in my life and what the function is of that hobby. And I just want this to reverberate because it's looking back about my career example. In your life and career and examples is always think about what do you value and what is the function. Because if you don't know what you value and you don't know what the function is, you're not going to be able to find balance. Similarly, just if we were in a value analysis study and I'm asking the group about their values or about their functions, if they can't identify the values and they can't identify the functions, they're not going to be able to find the balance in that study that we're looking for the best value coming out of it. Now, let's get back to sort of the meat of things besides the hobby. Let's talk about the real world for a bit. What were my early career aspirations? So I'm thinking about as soon as I got out of school, shortly after I started working for the Ministry of Transportation, I basically had three things that I wanted to do. I wanted to be a professional engineer. That was my main thing. And initially, the first 3 years, you're working on getting licensed. I wanted to have a senior position in the organization by the time I retired. I also wanted to have a family. I didn't know yet what was going to happen, how it was going to shape up, but I did want to have a family. But what's important here about this early career aspirations is to recognize that your aspirations evolve and change over time. I doubt if anybody can say that their career aspirations when they first got out of school were exactly what their career aspirations are today or will be at the time they retire. They're not going to be the same, and they change throughout things. So that balance point is always changing. Because I thought if I was a professional engineer and I had a senior position, and I'm talking later on what I saw as a senior was only about halfway through our organizational structure. But I saw that as the ultimate goal. but this changed over time. So balance points are going to change. Now, here comes the moment that changed my life. And this is really, what upset, because I thought I had found what the balance point was going to be, and this was fine. I was a single man. I knew I was going to be a professional engineer. I was working my way up the tree. And then all of a sudden, in the fall of 1996, when I was a very junior engineer, my manager came to me and said, we need to put out an assignment for something called a value engineering study and training. We have to do it within this fiscal year because that's where the budget's set up. You're the most junior engineer, and so therefore you're going to give up your Christmas vacation to get this assignment out. I really fell into it. It wasn't intentional. I didn't ask for it. I didn't research it. Some people say, oh, they looked into this, they discovered value. I fell into value analysis. And it was just because I was the most junior person in the office and I was assigned to do this task because I was seen as disposable. But that's okay. I was willing to take on any task that there was. And to me, it was just initially another work assignment until I got into it. And then I started to learn a little bit more as I was writing this, assignment up and trying to get it ready for, to go out. And eventually in the spring of 1997, we'll say late winter, early spring, it was about March. Okay. We actually had what was then, the Module 1 workshop. I'll talk a little bit later about that. And the light went on for me. It was like an aha moment. One day into this 5-day training that I was lucky enough to attend just as a reward because I'd written the assignment. And I'm sitting amongst all these other senior people who are just kind of nodding off and listening and saying, yeah, this is great. Maybe we should do this. So what can you tell us about it? And I had an aha moment saying, this could change my entire career. I really like this. I like the methodology. And this is something I want to add to doing in my life potentially. That was the spring of 1997. My balance point chart started to change, saying, how could I incorporate a little bit of this in my life? How could I possibly be more trained? How could I possibly be a facilitator in this? A couple years later, in the spring of 2000, so it'll be, I guess, May or June of 2000, I attended my first conference related to the value methodology, and I took my second training at that time. And it just opened my eyes to the whole different world of possibilities and what potential careers it could be within the value methodology. And that added a new aspiration to my life. It added a new thing I needed to balance in my life. It's a very important moment because I really didn't intend this. And in mere 4 years, not even 4 years, it was really maybe a little over 3. I went from a junior engineer that had never even heard of the methodology to adding a career aspiration that I wanted to incorporate this in my career, which is it really upset the balance that I thought I had found. In between, some other things happened as well, such as getting married, and having children on the way and all kinds of other things that change your life. But this was a monumental change in my life, was discovering the methodology. Now let's talk about work balance. And, can you have your cake and eat it too? That's one of the things my father would always say to me, Mike, you can't have your cake and eat it too. And you hear that a lot in life. But I'm not really sure that that is true. I love cake. I love to make cakes. Anybody who knows me knows that sometimes if I have a friend who has a special occasion, a birthday, a wedding, I'll even make the cake and decorate it for the event. But, of course, my favorite activity is actually eating the cake. So can you have your cake and eat it too? Well, not really the same cake, but you can find a balance point. You can do things. I had to look at this and say, okay, can I be a professional engineer, have my full engineering profession, and a certified value specialist at the same time? Is that possible? Certainly is possible. I've met a number of people throughout, the world that are professional engineers and certified value specialists. You can do both. Second question I had for myself is, can I be a certified value specialist and a senior manager within my workplace? Is that possible? A lot of people will say, oh, well, I chose this path, and I hear this all the time from people. Well, I wanted to be a certified value specialist, and so therefore I limited my career and I stayed in this one spot so I could be the certified value specialist. Or I hear them say, well, I wanted to go up the chain in command because I want to make more money. I want to be a supervisor. I want to be senior manager. So therefore, I had to give up the value analysis world, or therefore I can't take on the role of in value analysis. And I say, this is completely wrong. You can do them both. You can be a professional engineer. You can be a certified value specialist. We know that already. Lots of people have done it. You can be a certified value specialist, and you can still have a career within an organization that puts you in a senior position, and not just a company that only does value analysis. And like I said, in my case, in a government job where I can be a senior manager within the government, plus a certified value specialist. People have done it. It's doable. You can find that balance. You have to want to find that balance, though. And that's work balance. So that's the first part. How do I balance these things in my career? How do I balance how fast I move through things, how slow I move through things, what I do with my career, what roles I take on? How do I do that at the same time? How do I have my cake and eat it too when it comes to work? The next is family balance. And this is probably one of the most complex things that a lot of people don't take into consideration. If I look at just myself, I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm also a friend. And each of these things pulls you in different directions. Anybody who has parents, especially if you have a mother, you'll know that your mother always wants more time with you. Your siblings, your brothers, your sisters, they want to spend time with you. If you're a spouse, your spouse wants to spend time with you. If you have children, you must spend time with your children. They will demand it. If you don't spend time with children, this is pretty bad, but you need to spend time with children. And of course, you need to spend time with your friends. How do you find that balance of how much time do you spend with each of these groups? There are many roles that you have within that sort of family balance. They all take time out of your schedule. They all take time out of your life, and they all need balance. You can't focus strictly on being a husband and forget your roles as a son, brother, father, or friend. You really shouldn't focus strictly on being a friend and forget all of your roles to your immediate family. Maybe you can, maybe some people can, to have different situations. Once again, this is for me. You're going to have a different family balance. But once again, keep in mind that all of these things are pulling you in different directions. You have to find that center point, that balance of how much do I let each of these pull me? How much time do I spend with each of these groups that satisfies me as a person, that I've given the right balance to my family role, to my friends? You could even go a little bit further, because we talked about work balance. There's actually your role to your employer and your clients as well, as how much time you spend with them. You need to find that balance point. What is the function of each of these relationships? What do you value out of each of these relationships? How do you find that balance? And that changes over time with some of these things. Obviously, when you're very young, you may put a lot more balance into the role of being the son or the brother, or you may put a lot more role into the friend. But of course, you're not married yet, or you don't have any children, so you don't have to put any role towards for a spouse or being a parent. It changes over time. You need to find that balance. Keep in mind, because this is always in the background. You can't spend all the time in your career and ignore your family. That's not going to make for a very happy life. So who's responsible? And this is an important one. It's interesting. When I was going through this presentation in advance with my wife, she said to me, this is a very important point to make, and you should stress this. And it's true. It is not your employer's responsibility to give you balance. Despite how many times I've met young people who have come into the workplace for an interview, job interview, and they said, what are you going to do to help my work-life balance? Well, I can do certain things that relate to your job, but the reality is it's not my role as an employer to give you balance. It's your role, right, to find balance. It is not an association's responsibility to give you balance. It is not the role of Value Analysis Canada or Save International to say, here's how I'm going to balance your life and your career for you. It's not the role of a professional engineering association to give you balance. They're there to license, to certify, to put you on the right path, to give you what you need, a certification to help you with the job. It is your responsibility in all these situations to find your balance, because everybody's balance point is going to be different. We need some help. We need some advice. We need policies put in place that will help this. But it's still your responsibility to find your balance. You have to take responsibility for what you value and what the function is. Now, how do I apply this in a value analysis context? I think about myself. I had this goal that I wanted to be a professional engineer. I wanted to be a certified value specialist. I wanted to be in a senior position in my professional engineering career, but I didn't want to give up the value analysis. I still want to be a practitioner as well as being an owner and other things. How could I reach that goal? The big keys here are three things: take time, make time, and be active. Somebody's got a note here that the audio's gone. Is the audio gone out, Steve, or?
We can still hear you.
Okay, good. Okay, just for one person. Okay, thanks. So take time, make time, and be active. It does take time. It's not going to happen overnight. And I'm going to talk about that on a couple of slides here to go. It doesn't happen overnight. The second thing is you have to make time. That means that this is not going to happen as part of your regular rate day. If you want to take on extra stuff, I want to do both my professional career as an engineer and my career as a certified value specialist, I had to make time for this. Just like you make time for your family and friends, you make time for your hobbies. We talked about that. You have to make time for your career. You have to make time for your balance. And then that third one, which is very important, is be active. You can't just sit back and say, this is going to fall in my lap. I had to make a choice to be active in Value Analysis Canada, to be active in SAVE, to be active in the value world, to be active in the workplace. That's what I had to do to make this all work. It doesn't just happen. It's not somebody else going to make it happen. It's me that had to make this happen, to find that balance point. Take time, make time, and be active. Think about those as we go forward, along with your values and functions. So now we talk about MTO, because I was in a fortunate situation that at the same time that I was discovering value analysis MTO, we were also having, that the value analysis program was being built at MTO. Prior to 1996, there was no value analysis at MTO. It started in 1996. I was lucky to be there near the start, right? Not quite at the very, very start, but very close to the start. I got involved in 1996. Then we moved into 97, 98, and there was the foundations of a program starting. And I give a lot of credit to some of the people. I think they may both be on the call tonight, but Tom Fletcher and of course Steve Holmes. Tom was the first sort of person that was assigned to the value program, file as an official job within MTO, and Steve was our first sort of value coordinator, I guess we'll say, right? Or program manager for MTO, and they really got the ball rolling. And they involved me, especially Steve. Steve got me right into this and got me right. And then we moved forward to 1999, and what things started up at MTO was called the value engineering coordinators, and this VECC, which is Value Engineering Coordinators Committee, is what we called it. And this was started out of our head office function, and they looked for volunteers. And I had known about this coming along. I knew about VE because I'd learned about it in 96, 97. And I was trying to get interested, trying to get involved during 97, 98 as other things were going on. I looked at some of the jobs, and I was too junior sort of to be in the right spot at the right time at that time. But in 1999, when this committee was being formed, I stuck up my hand and said, yes, I want to volunteer. I want to be on that committee. I want to help. And I started helping with this program in 1999 in earnest. Like I said, a lot of the groundwork was laid slightly before that in the time when I was learning about VE. But I got on the coordinators program, so I wanted to be there to help build the program. And this was a choice. I had a choice. I could have just taken the first training and forgot about it and said, well, it's too bad it didn't work out for me in life. However, I volunteered. I wasn't going to get the position given to me. I wasn't a value program coordinator where I was going to have this job as before I had a job. I had to take on this as a volunteer position on top of my regular day job. I had to give up time. I had to find a new balance point where I could still do my day job and I could take on being this coordinator. And this helped me ultimately get certified. So I had some choices to ponder. And for me personally, and I keep coming back to choices here, what did I want out of MTO? Once again, I could choose just to be an engineer and nothing else. I could choose just to be a worker bee my entire career. I could choose to be a senior manager. I could choose to be an executive. What did I want out of MTO? The other question was, what did I want from value analysis? Did I want to just learn about it and say, yeah, this is something I know about, I can engage others to do this service? Or did I want to be a practitioner? Did I want to do this for part of my job, or did I want to do this for the rest of my career? And I thought long and hard about this. What did I want at MTO? Well, as I said earlier, I still wanted to be in a senior position by the time I retired. I thought at that point in time, as we got into early 2000, I discovered what it was like to be a supervisor. And I thought, I kind of want to be in management and supervisory role. That's what I wanted. What did I want from value analysis? I definitely wanted to be a certified value specialist. I wanted that certification. And I really thought that this is something I wanted to do in my career at MTO. I wanted to help build the program. But I also said, this is a great thing for when I'm done, when I retire from MTO, I'd like to still be involved. I'd like to be out there and see some of these practitioners. They're working for many years later in their life, still doing studies and having a fun time doing it. It looked really fun to me. This is something I wanted to carry through my entire career and take on past into retirement. Then I had to say to myself, how could these coexist? Where is the balance point? How could I have that successful MTO career and have what I wanted out of value analysis? How could I do that? Well, I found a way. Let's talk about this. But think about choices. These all come down to choices. We make choices every single day. You make choices on when you get up in the morning, what you're going to wear, what you're going to eat for breakfast, how are you going to get to work, which route you're going to take to work, what you do when you get in the office, if you even go in the office. We make choices every single day. However, everybody here on this call should understand that the choices you make should be based on value and function. What do I value when I choose this or that? What is the function that I'm achieving with this or that? And they all apply to every choice. You think about any choice that you've got to make. There's always a function involved in that choice, and there's always something you value, one side or the other, that's going to control the choice you make. It could be as simple as whether you own a car and value driving yourself to work, or whether you take public transit because you value time or other things. What is the function? When I get up and decide what to wear in the morning, is it the function because I want to look good in the office? Is it a function because I need work clothes that are going to protect me? What is the function of the clothing I'm putting on? What is the function of breakfast? Think about this. Value and function. We have to make these choices. And choices are very important in finding balance. So, choice number one that I made that helped me achieve this balance was to actively volunteer. That was a very important choice. What did I decide? Well, first up was the value engineering coordinator role I took on top of my regular job. This kept me involved in that committee, kept me involved in value analysis. I was involved in that committee from the very start of that committee. Steve could go through and tell you about who the initial members were on that committee. But I was involved in that committee for over 26 years, from the start of the committee right up until my retirement. I kept involved. No matter what my job was, I stayed involved in that committee. Now, sometimes I was a value engineering coordinator. Later on in life, I became like an ex officio, an advisor to the committee. But I still kept involved in that committee, went to all the committee meetings for over 26 years because that had a function, and the function was to incorporate value analysis in my career. And I could incorporate value analysis in my career by being a member of that committee and taking that on as a volunteer role. Very important. This was a volunteer role. I did not pay extra for this. I did not get extra time for this. Yes, I was compensated for my time if it was during work hours, but I often took other work home and did work outside of my job so that I could find time for this volunteer activity. I had to make time. Once again, remember that take time, make time. I had to make time to do this. Second choice I made, which along this actively volunteer, and this is why I talk about be involved, be active. I made a choice to volunteer with Value Analysis Canada. Early on, MTO discovered Value Analysis Canada. I got involved. I started with helping with activities, helping run conferences, helping run little events we had. Eventually, that led to a board position. Eventually, that led to being elected president. I had a great time with Value Analysis Canada. And what was the function? The function there was society service, because I knew to get certified and maintain being certified, I needed to be actively involved in the value society, and this would also help me learn and grow by being actively involved. So I needed that society service. The next choice I made was to attend conferences. I attended both Value Analysis Canada and SAVE conferences. Often, and people can witness this, it was on my own time and budget. I couldn't rely on my employer to send me to these conferences. I couldn't rely on my employer to fund these conferences. But I was willing to take vacation time and money out of my own pocket as needed to attend these conferences and fund these conferences. And this was a discussion I had with my wife, because it was a very serious discussion. We talked about this. Was I going to take vacation time that I wasn't spending with her or with the kids to go to a conference? Was I going to spend some money out of the family budget to finance going to a conference? And the choice was yes, I did, because I had a function. The function there was to learn value management. If I didn't go to conferences, I wasn't going to keep current. I wasn't going to learn the value methodology. And we all know that this is very important. And some of the great things, I'd say some of the best conferences I've ever attended were the Value Analysis Canada conferences, especially the early ones. We had a lot of great times. We had a lot of great speakers. I learned so much at conferences for Value Analysis Canada and SAVE. I learned a lot. The fourth choice, an active volunteer, as I chose to volunteer with SAVE International. This is something that I built upon after out of my Value Analysis Canada volunteering. I started with SAVE, beginning involved in conferences, right? Really from the point when we had a combined conference between Value Analysis Canada and SAVE International, and then running conferences, getting involved in organizing conferences for a few years, led to a board position, which eventually led to me being elected president. And once again, this function of society service. I wanted to serve in the society. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to be involved. I wanted to get those points that would lead up to me getting my certification and maintaining my certification throughout the years. So that was the important choice number one, which was actively volunteer. I had to make time in my life to actively volunteer to get this part of the balance for my career. Choice number two, very important, and choice number one sort of led to this, as I chose that I wanted to be a certified value specialist. And I had to go through a number of steps. Everybody, who's a certified value specialist understands this. I had to complete the training courses, and this took time. I did what was my original Mod 1, which is now sort of VMF1 equivalent, in 1997. It took 3 years until 2000 before I could get to the second training course, the Mod 2. Nowadays, you can do a lot faster, but in those days, it took me 3 years to get to a point when the next opportunity, because I had to go to a conference to do it at that time. And then, shortly thereafter, I wrote the AVS exam. Now this is sort of getting your VMA, but my first step towards getting my CVS. What was the function? I had a function here that I need to learn the value methodology. I had to take time for these courses. I had to take time out of my schedule. I had to make time to go to these things. And I had to find a balance in my life that allowed this to happen. The next thing, I had to participate in studies. I couldn't become a certified value specialist if I didn't participate in studies. And how did I do that? I had to seek out opportunities. Once again, the function is practice of value methodology. But studies didn't just land in my lap. I know when I was president of SAVE, I would get constant calls from people saying, can you give me a study? I need to get a study. Once again, it's not my role to find you a study. I can maybe give you some contacts, some suggestions, some advice. But personally, I had to actually look at the projects I was dealing with and say, would this make a good candidate for a value analysis study? Should we do a study? And then I'd have to go and sell it to my supervisors and my management to get them to buy into me doing a study as part of that project, or to me participating in a study. That was part of it. I had to participate in studies. I had to get enough points. Then I had to write the exam. It took me until 2005 to get an opportunity to write the exam. The big thing here about this is about taking time. It takes time, and you have to take time to do this. In my case, it actually took me 8 years to do this. Some people do this in 2 years. I think it's great if you can do this in 2 to 3 years. And there's lots of people who can, and I can tell you that that's very possible, especially now in today's environment. It's even more easier to do it in a couple of years. But if you want to find balance, you can't rush this. Don't expect instant success. Don't expect instantly I'm going to have all these things in my life. I had to find a balance point between doing the training, finding enough studies, writing the exams, going to conferences, volunteering to get this all to line up so that I could become a certified value specialist. And it wasn't going to happen overnight. To find that balance point to not take away from other parts of my life, it took a few years. However, I knew that it was going to be worth it. I'm not at the least bit sad that I took the 8 years that I went to go through this. I'm happy I put that time in. That time has been rewarding. I'm very happy for this. Don't expect balance to happen overnight. It doesn't. You can't rush it. What was the third big choice? My third big choice was to take value analysis, value engineering, the value methodology with me everywhere. This is a very important choice because this is how I could balance being the professional engineer with a successful career, becoming a senior person in the government, with also being a certified value specialist and maintaining my passion and involvement in the value methodology. How did I do that? The first thing is I considered all my engineering career opportunities with a VA context. As jobs came along, promotional opportunities came along, I looked at those and I said, if I took this position, could I still be involved in value analysis? Could I still practice as the CVS? Could I still do this? Could I still be involved and volunteer for, say, Volunteer for Value Analysis Canada if I took this job? And yes, I will admit there are some jobs that may have helped my career quite a bit, but I couldn't have done them alongside of the value methodology. And so therefore, I didn't chase those opportunities. But if I had an opportunity where I could advance my career and I could still do the value methodology, still practice VE, I was going to do that. The second thing was important. As I looked for value analysis opportunities in the office I was in at the time, I didn't look for others just to drop something in my lap. If I was in a design office and I was working on highway design projects, I looked for value analysis opportunities in that office on the projects I was working with or that other people around me were working on. If I was in a maintenance office, I was looking for value analysis opportunities in doing maintenance. If I was in a construction office, I was looking for value analysis opportunities in doing construction activities. I looked for value analysis opportunities around me in the office I was in at the time. I always took value analysis with me everywhere I went. I was a champion like that, and I'm going to talk about the next rate of that methodology. I took it with me in the office. Third thing, you have to be a constant champion of value analysis. You have to always talk about it. You have to always tell your peers and your supervisors, and later on the people that report to you, the benefits of value analysis and why it's important and why you want to do it. You're always selling that because I wanted to take with me every year. I wanted to keep that balance as part of my career. And the balance point was being a champion always. Now, there was a trade-off, and that is true. I did constrain my final level at work, my final position I was going to be at, the final point I ended in with my government career, to find the balance where I could still be involved in value analysis, still be a certified value specialist. I made that choice. I didn't constrain it very much, just a teeny tiny bit. And I did sometimes constrain some of the opportunities I chased, which maybe affected things. But it didn't make a big difference in the long run. It was a teeny difference. Because I found that balance and maintained that balance, all the times kept rebalancing as things went along. Talking about developing, maintaining a government program, because this is once again a balance point we had to find in. There's many intricacies to this. Many things went on to build this program. And once again, there was choices and different roles people would have. The role I chose was to volunteer on the committee. I chose not to be the leader of the government program. I chose not to just sit back and watch. I chose to be a volunteer on the committee that was giving advice, helping to form the policies, helping to do studies. That was the role I chose. Once again, you're going to make choices in life. Do I want to lead this? Do I want to work on it? Do I want to provide advice? the role I chose was to be a volunteer in the committee and sort of actively work on things. I mean, we could talk about how involved that was, but I chose to be a volunteer in the committee that was helping form the policy and make sure this went forward. The next thing that comes in is there's a mix of delivery methods. Everybody who's building a program should understand that you need, especially if you want to be, find this in your career, you need a balance of consultant delivered activities, methods, right? Where a consultant comes in and just does a study. You need some in-house, and maybe complete in-house, or it may be a combination of in-house resources with consultant resources, and you need some retainers. We needed that balance. Early on, obviously in the very early stage of the program, we didn't know what we were doing. We hired completely outside consultants to do that, to do our studies, conduct our studies, and we learned from them. Then, as we got experience, we wanted to work on our own certification or our methodology, get that balance point. We started getting involved in participating, doing the studies, cooperating in studies. And also, you need that mix for how fast you can react to things. Typically, if you're having a straight consultant, you put out something for bid, and it could take months to hire somebody to come in and do a study because of the government acquisition process. If you're doing it strictly with in-house resources, you can react pretty quickly. You can say, oh yeah, I got time next week to work on this, or I got time in 2 weeks. However, you also have to find time to do the reports and the studies and the background stuff, which may not always take place. A retainer is a great thing because you have somebody who's got like a service on demand. You can pretty quickly snap and have somebody in to help you do a study. And that's really effective at times. So you need that balance of mix of different delivery methods. Very important choice. All about balance once again. You can't do it all with only one. People will try. Maybe some people are very successful. We found, at least in our organization, we needed that balance. We had to deliver this program with that mix of methodologies. That was the healthiest thing to find a balance. The last thing that was very important was doing this on top of other work. As I mentioned earlier, this means extra hours. This means using vacation time. This means maybe missing things. You can't just do this all the time unless you're the one person whose role is to manage the program. If it's just on top of other work, you have to find that balance point where you're putting some extra hours, some extra time in, maybe using some evenings, maybe taking up some time on your vacation to put towards the program.
Like
Very
we're going
important.
to need to progress pretty soon to Q's and A's.
A couple more slides, Steve. So here's the advice I've got for a program. Find a strong executive champion. This is very important. Without that strong executive champion, you're not going to succeed. Second thing, live, function, and be a champion yourself. As we discussed, it's very important to be a champion. If you're not a champion, it's not going to succeed. Third, that mix of delivery. You need that mix of delivery options. It's very important for balance. And the last one is you need a firm succession plan. This is probably the one where we fell down the most. You have to have a succession plan. You have to constantly be building some young people, some new people up in the program to make it live and make it thrive, and constantly changing and bringing people into your group so that it evolves over time. So what were the results? The results when it came to MTO. MTO had an award-winning value program. We managed to build a program from nothing to award-building program. We found that right balance point. As Steve mentioned earlier, I was one of only 2 certified value specialists within the Ontario Public Service, working for MTO. We managed to find that balance point to do it. I retired from MTO with 34 years of service as a senior manager. If I go back to my initial goal was a senior position by time of retirement. I was a senior manager. I was very happy with my career point where I ended up at MTO. What were the results within the value methodology? As I mentioned earlier, I was a past president of Value Analysis Canada, past president of Save International. I'm currently the president of the Miles Value Foundation. There's things within the value methodology that have kept me satisfied. I said, yes, I've achieved my goals because the value methodology has benefited from the time I put into it as a volunteer. Not everybody's going to be able to say all these things, but a lot of people can. But it's still important to say, I'm happy with that balance point that I found. I found that balance point where I could be that senior manager at MTO, plus I could do these things. And what are the current balance for me right now? Well, I'm semi-retired. To a certain extent, I'm almost busier now with hobbies and work than I was before. I'm currently the Save Registrar. That's something that just started the 1st of this month. It's a newly created position. And, I'm hoping with that position that I can help others find their balance point. I know right now there's a lot of talk around certification with Save. It's changed a lot over the last few years. Once again, it has to evolve over time. That's very important. But I came along this opportunity and said, well, how can I, now that I'm sort of semi-retired, how can I give back? How can I change and how contribute to society? Well, right now, certification needs my help. And I'm happy to be the SAVE registrar and help with that and see what can we do to help with the programs, the policies moving forward to change how things were done, because it has to evolve. It can't be the same way it always was. You know, I've also got an on-demand contract with MTO for technical training. I'm keeping the professional engineer me happy, still doing some professional engineering as well as the value analysis work. And I'm open as well to some freelance value studies, and some stuff like that is lining up for me as well. You can find that balance. That balance has followed me into retirement. And I go back to the very first of when I made that decision in 2000, but what I want to do, I'm doing it right now exactly what I wanted at that point in time. So what is my advice to the people in the crowd right now? Accept change. Things evolve. Things are not going to be the way that they always were. You're just going to think you get something balanced and it's going to change. You have to accept that change and just rebalance. There are trade-offs. There's going to always be trade-offs and balance. Remember what you value. What do you value? What is the maximum value? What is the function? Third thing, success and balance is rarely gifted. As I said earlier, it's up to you to find your balance point. And lastly, stick with it. Don't give up. It's going to take time. Don't get discouraged. Talk to your peers, talk to your friends. Stick with it. Don't give up. And with that, I'd really like to thank you for listening to me tonight and open the floor to any questions.